The cafe went dead silent. A woman's terrified scream cut through the chatter, and every head turned. Two men were dragging her toward the door, her purse spilling across the floor, coffee cups smashing in their path. Before anyone could react, a chair scraped violently against the floor. A tall man in a worn leather jacket stood up from the corner table, eyes locked on the scene. His voice was calm but cold enough to freeze the air. "Touch my wife again, and you'll regret it. If you want to know what happened next, and why this moment would change their lives forever, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because you won't believe the truth behind this scene." It had started like any other rainy Thursday in Willowbrook. Daniel Cole had dropped his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, off at school before ducking into the little corner cafe he'd been visiting for years. He liked the place because it was quiet in the mornings, the smell of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet scent of cinnamon rolls, and the owner always played soft jazz in the background. He took his usual seat by the window, where he could sip his coffee and glance through job listings on his old laptop. Life hadn't been kind to Daniel lately. He'd been a single dad since his wife, Clara, passed away 3 years earlier, and though he kept moving forward for Emma's sake, the weight of those years had carved lines into his face. He never expected that walking into the cafe that day would throw him headfirst into a moment that would test everything in him. The bell above the door jingled as a young woman came in, shaking rain from her hair. She wore a faded green sweater and jeans, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She moved to the counter and ordered in a soft voice, but Daniel noticed her hands were trembling. There was something about the way she kept glancing toward the window, as if she were afraid someone might be watching. He might have ignored it, people have their own troubles, but a few minutes later, the cafe's calm was shattered. The door slammed open so hard it rattled the glass. Two men, both broad-shouldered and reeking of aggression, stepped inside. One had a scar down the side of his face, the other kept cracking his knuckles like he was preparing for a fight. Without a word, they marched straight to the young woman's table, and before she could react, one of them grabbed her arm. The other snatched her bag, scattering her wallet, keys, and a half-eaten muffin onto the floor. She tried to pull away, her voice breaking as she said, "Let go of me." But the man only tightened his grip, twisting her arm. People froze in place, hands half-raised, eyes wide, but no one moved. The cafe owner stood behind the counter, his lips pressed into a thin line, clearly terrified. And Daniel, from his corner table, felt his pulse pounding in his ears. He'd seen enough to know this wasn't just a petty argument. These men weren't here to talk, they were here to take her, and she was scared for her life. Without thinking, Daniel pushed back his chair, the scrape of the legs on the hardwood echoing like a gunshot in the tense silence. He stepped forward, his boots heavy on the floor, his eyes never leaving the man's hand on her arm. His voice, when it came, was steady but dangerous, like a storm rolling in. "Touch my wife again, and you'll regret it." The scarred man blinked, confusion flickering in his eyes. "Your wife?" he sneered. "This isn't your business, old man." But Daniel didn't flinch. He walked right up to them, his shoulders squared, his jaw set. He could feel every eye in the cafe on him, the air so tight it felt like breathing glass. The young woman's eyes widened at his words, her lips parting in silent shock, but she didn't correct him. Daniel shifted his stance slightly, putting himself between her and the men. "You've got 3 seconds to let her go," he said, his tone flat and final. The man laughed, a low, ugly sound, but Daniel could see it, the hesitation in his eyes, the calculation. Daniel wasn't a big man by Hollywood standards, but he carried himself like someone who'd seen enough fights to know exactly how to end one. The scarred man let go, shoving her away like she was trash, but his partner stepped forward, shoving Daniel hard in the chest. The impact made him stumble back a half step, but he didn't go down. Instead, he straightened slowly, his eyes locked on the man's like a warning shot. "Leave," Daniel said simply. Something in his tone made them think twice. With a final glare, they turned, storming out into the rain and slamming the door behind them. The cafe stayed frozen for another second, and then the air seemed to rush back in. The young woman was breathing hard, clutching her arm where bruises were already forming. Daniel turned to her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her voice trembled when she spoke. I think so. Thank you. I didn't know what to do." He could see she was on the edge of breaking down, and he gently guided her to sit at his table. The other customers went back to pretending they weren't staring, but Daniel didn't care. He ordered her a fresh coffee, slid it in front of her, and said quietly, "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." "But those men, who are they?" Her hands shook as she wrapped them around the cup. They work for someone I used to know. Someone who doesn't take no for an answer." She looked away, her voice dropping. "I thought I could get away from him. I thought I could start over. But he found me." Daniel's stomach knotted. He'd dealt with enough in his own life to know the look in her eyes. A mix of fear, exhaustion, and the faintest flicker of hope. "You're safe for now," he said firmly. "And as long as I'm here, they won't lay a finger on you." She glanced at him, studying his face as if trying to figure out why a stranger would step in like that. Then she whispered, "Why did you say I was your wife?" Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "Because they needed to believe I had a reason to fight harder for you than anyone else would. And because it was the fastest way to get them to back off." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the gratitude in her eyes, though she didn't have the words for it yet. Outside, the rain kept falling, the world carrying on as if nothing had happened. But for Daniel, something had shifted. He didn't know this woman's full story yet, but he knew one thing: he wasn't about to walk away and leave her to face whatever was hunting her alone. And deep down, a part of him that had been closed off for years, since losing Clara, was beginning to stir. Little did he know, this was just the beginning. That night, Daniel couldn't stop replaying the scene in his head. Emma was curled up on the couch watching cartoons, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. Across from him, the young woman, whose name he'd learned was Grace, sat with a mug of tea, her hands wrapped tight around it. She'd told him bits and pieces, an ex-boyfriend who controlled her every move, debts she never owed, threats that followed her from town to town. Daniel could see she was used to running, but tonight, she was exhausted. "You can stay here," he said finally. "At least until you figure out your next step." She hesitated, eyes darting toward the window like she expected those men to appear at any second. "You don't know what you're getting into," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward. "I know exactly what I'm getting into. No one should have to face that alone." Outside, a car rolled slowly past the house, headlights sweeping through the living room. Grace froze. Daniel's jaw tightened. Whoever was after her hadn't given up. And in that moment, he made a silent promise: if they came for her again, they'd have to go through him first.